So in order to really have effective transformational change, to change this pathway towards a further climate crisis, some of these fundamental structures that we've had, the Industrial Revolution, consumerism, the technology and information that we are now available, we need to make them more sustainable. We need to change them into something that doesn't overuse the natural resources that we have, and that will allow for equitable development also in the social domain. The resilience against change is actually very forceful still right now. Calculations from IMF, World Bank and the GEF show that in 2014, and this is just 5 years ago, every dollar spent on global climate action was outspent by $100 that went towards climate change. So 1 to 100. That's not really, we're more or less powerless against this, unless something changes. The problem is unsustainable relations between society, the economy, and the environment. And how can we evaluate whether we see positive feedback loops that will allow for systems change towards sustainability? And even small activities, if they are innovative enough, can make a huge difference. So it's not as if a small intervention would not have potential impact on the planet, so to say. The first message that I want to impress upon you is that a theory of change, which I assume is actually widespread in practice throughout DFID and BASE, is a first step to explore the context of the intervention, to basically see whether you have the possibility to look at transformational change. Because it allows you to include assumptions on trends, impact drivers, intermediary stage, causal pathways, and so on. And you can represent it in a non-linear way. You can try to include in the theory of change these feedback loops and the lever that you would want to apply to go to change. And the challenge is then to find the right level in such a theory of change. I've seen many, many detailed theories of change, and I'm actually against them. Because if you bring too much detail in your theory of change, you don't see the bigger picture anymore, and it becomes all difficult to follow. The second issue then is to recognize that we need to think about this from a systems perspective. So I've put in a few words here. Systems can be hard, soft, chaotic, ordered, and structured. So you have to think through what kind of system do you have, and how would you be able to incorporate thinking about that in your activities. So complex systems may actually be open, they may be nested, and they tend to have non-linear causal relationship. So small causes may have huge effects, and again, this is the lever or the butterfly issue. And the whole is larger than the sum of its parts. Causality is iterative and has feedback loops. That's all good to know, but how do we then incorporate that in evaluations? We do that from the sustainability perspective. So this is the third point I would want to raise, that sustainability is achieved when systems become adaptive and balanced over time in the relationship between the social, economic, and environmental domains. So how to use this systems approach in evaluation? Some preliminary thoughts in this regard are to identify it as a systems issue and to basically start thinking it through in systems terms. And to do that, it's basically good to sit together in an interdisciplinary team of people and basically discuss what are the systems that we are influencing, and what are the influences of the systems on our activities, on our projects. So often the lever for transformational change is found in either innovation, social innovation, or in technological innovation. And this is another issue where our theories don't really support us in dealing with this. If you look at economic theory, for example, technological and social innovation are unexpected, they are outside of the box, they are not part of the theory, they are external to economics. So we need to include it in the design of evaluations that look at these interventions. We need to see whether it works, whether it is cost effective, whether it can be upscaled, and what the risks and impacts are. The theory of no change, barrier analysis. Why are things not happening as they were supposed to? So the theory of no change, this has been developed in a meta-evaluation of climate mitigation projects, but it's applicable to almost everywhere. Christine Werlen developed this, and she identified a series of barriers that have to do with finances, all kinds of finances, so access to finance, expertise in finance, ignorance about finance, but also consumers' users could have barriers, lack of affordability of innovation, lack of expertise as well. If you don't know, then why would you do it? And the supply chain and infrastructure and policy makers. So we've shifted now to more or less the risks, whether we are indeed able to do what we need to do. And other issues are emerging in this, asymmetrical relations in our systems. For example, Nassim Taleb, who's famous for his book, The Black Swan, which basically deals with the unknown and the unexpected, writes about, in Skin in the Game, about the financial crisis in 2008 leading to asymmetric solution. The banks took the risk and lost, but the taxpayer had to pay the bill, which the taxpayer resents. And then basically our system is in danger. Our democratic system, as a result, is in danger. The last point is then impact drivers and pathways. Systems tend to have non-linear causality, but more importantly, and we've discussed that, more importantly, non-linear refers to mathematics more than to feedback loops. And the mathematics is power law. One quantity varies as the power of another. So y is x to the power of k. And this simple formula changes the whole thing. This is the butterfly effect. This is something tiny can suddenly grow into something enormous. Basically what I recommend is using mixed methods in evaluations to be aware of differences in time, space, and scale. So causal pathways have different time ranges. Natural processes take longer than some of the human processes that we have, and economic processes. And geographical space, environmental boundaries do not follow state boundaries. So things don't always overlap. And complexity scales, where simple, straightforward, linear intervention to systems nested in systems. So the key messages that I wanted to impress upon you is the use of a theory of change for analysis, for inspiration, for thinking about it, to adopt a systems perspective, evaluate sustainability as a systems issue and as the final goal. Remember this issue of getting to the next valley. Focus on technology innovation as the pivot for transformation. Identify the risks and hazards associated with the transformation. And identify impact drivers and pathways and trace them through time, space, and scales. And develop this in interdisciplinary teams.